Okay, so the Shiur today, I want to talk about a small, interesting nakuda at the end of Siman Kuf Pei Zayin. If you look at the end, towards the end of Siman Kuf Pei Zayin, Sif Yud Beis, after you learn all the halachas of Arei Machmas Tashmish, so what happens? What taka happens in the end? So in Sif Yud Beis it says, Arei Machmas Tashmish Gimel Pa'amim, Asr lahashhoisa, af im einay reitza lavoi aleha. If the marriage is taka over, for this reason, then they can't live together anymore, even if he's willing to accept that there's no chance, not happening again. Asr lahashhoisa, elim kain, reitza lahashhoisa yedei shalish, there has to be a third party involved, you're staying legally married, but essentially completely separated. Look at the Alter Rebbe there. The Alter Rebbe in Sif Katan and Gimel sums it up in short that the concern is that Shema Yavai Aleha, because the whole thing is only Nisa D'Rabbanan, so we're concerned that he's just going to, his temptation will get the better of him, so we can't keep them together. Now, in other words, L'chayra, B'chalal, there's a question, why is there no Isser of Yichud Be'ishtoi Nida, l'chayra, she's also to her husband like any other one of the arayas. But we have a Gemara in Sanhedrin. Gemara in Sanhedrin says, going through some psukim in Shir Hashirim, Suga b'sheshanim, that afilu k'suga shel sheshanim la'yiftu behem pratzis. Rashi explains, usually you need a brick wall, a stone wall to keep you away from trouble. Suga b'sheshana means you have a siyag, but it's made out of roses. It's very, very nice little decorative gate, not keeping anyone out if they want to get in. But that's the mile of the Yidden, the shvach of the Yidden is that they're not le'yirfetzu behem pratzis. The Gemara says, that's like the meiser with the min. The min asked Rav Kahana, you say that a nida is allowed to be yichud with her husband, and you have eish ben oeres ve'enam have heves. The fire is there. It's not going to catch. It's not going to catch fire. How can you be so sure that you won't be nichshel? So he answered, "Atayra he'ida aleinu." This suga b'sheshanim lifetzu behem pratzis. So we're confident. If you look in the Tosfos there in Sanhedrin and in other places as well, Tosfos says, yichud is deraisa, which is its own discussion, but Tosfos holds that it is. So how can Suga b'sheshanim and Shir Hashirim come and undermine a din yichud mideraisa? It says, v'yesh leimar, that's by other yisurim that are permanent. Avol nida seifa li tahir. Ultimately, it's a cycle. The nida will become tahir sometime soon. So that's why, between that and between being from, we're confident, l'yifritzu ben pratzis. And then Tosfos says, there's another Tanai that they have to at least have consummated the marriage once, but if not, then we have the din ksubis that you have the whole issue of taka sleeping together b'yichud if it doesn't happen on the first night, which is its own topic. If you look later in Siman Kuf Tzadik Hey, Sif Aleph, the Mechaber writes, of course, Chayav Adam Lifrish Mi Ishtoi B'mei Tamasa, the Harchakas. I mean, first, of course, you can't be with her mamish, and of course there are Harchakas. Aval Mutter Lis Yachadima. Here's where Shulchan Aruch addresses this yichud as Mutter the Kivin Shaba Aleh Pamachas Sulei Takaf Yitzrei, because they were already together once. So what's the vart? The vart is now already, he knows what the experience is like. He's not, the urge isn't that strong. So with all of this in the mind, l'chayra, the idea here in Siman Kuf Pei Zayin is that once we've established that ein soifa lihitar, Tosfos said soifa lihitar, what if not? Then yichud returns, or something along these lines. So Ebazoi, with this yisod, this leads to a number of variations to a very relevant question nowadays, which is, let's say there is a problematic marriage, and the woman declares she's refusing to go to the mikveh anymore. Do we have a problem? Does that mean that there's Isser Yichud now? Because the way around the problem of Isser Nida maybe isn't present here anymore. Similarly, you have a marriage that's essentially dead, it ended, they're in divorce proceedings, but sometimes they're still fighting over the property, the possessions. No one wants to leave the property, to abandon the property, so they're still living in the same house, they're ignoring each other, whatever's going on, but they're still technically, it's possible that there's an union of yichud here. Is there a problem with yichud? And from a slightly different angle, you have an irreligious couple, and they start being niskarev, and the husband makes a lot more progress than the wife. The husband essentially is from now, and the wife is not having it, to the extent that she declares that she's absolutely not interested in keeping taras hamishpacha. She doesn't have anything against her husband, she doesn't mind being together, but she's not enduring the stuff. Weiter, do we have a yichud problem? Could be a very relevant question. Now, this is something that you find discussions over in various forms in our generation.
I'm saying it works out.
Huh?
I'm saying, if she's living together with her, saying the old halachic is that you have to do it. You can't do it. It's worse than yichud.
Okay. Well, let's start with yichud. Fine. So, many point out that seemingly the first mucker that deals with questions of this type was not that long ago. It's the Marsham. The Marsham, of course, is of Shalom Mordechai Shvadron. The first one, he had a grandson by the same name, who was famous for being a Maggid, but his Zayda was the Paisik from Galicia, passed away in the year 1911. I just quoted from him a few days ago from Das Torah and Shulchan Aruch. But here, this is a tshuva of his in Shut Marsham Chelik Beis Siman Kuf Ayin Ches. It's addressed to Tzvi Hirsch Friedman of Sabrance in Hungary. Interestingly, he was a Hungarian Rav that moved to America, the recipient of the tshuva, and he passed away here in 1969. He's buried here in New York. Stam. The shaila is, says there's a woman that's already been a number of years that she refuses to go to the mikveh, and she says it's going to stay that way forever. She's out to get her husband. Can the husband be misyachad with her? Do we say that this is essentially like a woman, that it's also for the husband to be with her, like the Sidrei Tara in Siman Kuf Tzadik Hey, Sivkat and Beis, right? Because in Shulchan Aruch, technically, in Siman Kuf Tzadik Hey, it said the reason why you could be with your wife is because that they already were together. That doesn't mention the other prat. What about the Yesh Laheter? Tosfos mentioned both things. So the Sidrei Tara says, it's taka both. There has to be a heter. But if there's taka no heter, then even if they were already together, there's still an Isser Yichud. You need both. As seems to be indicated taka by here in Kuf Peizayin, where it says they can't be together. And surely they were together before. That's the whole Re'em Achmas Tashmish. So, is that what we're going to apply in this case? Or we can say, look, she can always change her mind. There's nothing set in stone here. It's not an isser, it's just her own volition. She can always change her mind. So, Zak the Marsham, Ani is daiti a dover poshet, the usser les yachidima. It's taka poshet that it's usser, because you have another sif in Siman Kuf Peizayin, Sif Yadalad, talks about Isha sheyesh la p'tzaim begufa. She can't toivel for that reason. So it just says that, the Sif just says that, they can't be, if he wasn't a kind pervertivia, he has to end the marriage, he has to marry someone else. That Sif doesn't address the question of, what about in that case, where it's not an Isser per se, she just, for medical reasons, she can't go to the mikveh? What's the story with Yichud there? So there's a tshuva from the Veshav HaKayin, and Simulamed, he says that, Vada also in Sif Yadal, it's usher to be misyachid. The two go just like in Sif Yud Beis. It translates into, the marriage ending translates into they can't be together. So the same would be in Sif Yadalit. So you see that the idea applies to other cases as well. Right? And again, here Vaiter, there's no Isser, she just, it's something that can heal any day. And the truth is, even Re'em Achmas Tashmish could have Shishit Asrape. The problem could go away. So just like Re'em Achmas Tashmish is an Isser Yichud, so therefore, by P'tzoim there's an Isser Yichud. And Ebazoi, same here as well. where it's not p'tzayim, but emotionally she decided it's not shaykh. And then he wants to bring a raya from the Gemara in Ksubis. It says in Gemara in Ksubis about a meiredes, right? The concept of meiredes exists in Gemara. The context there is more financial. Finding her, taking off from the ksuba for every week that passes by. So the Gemara Taka asks, what about the weeks that she's a nida? Is she really depriving him? Is she doing anything during that time, or she was usher anyway? So the Gemara says, no, we find her for those weeks as well. Why? Because stam nida is pas besali. He knows that we're counting down. But if she's a meiredes, ain't le pas besali. That's what the Gemara itself says. She could always change her mind there also. Does that make it pas besale? No, you see from the Gemara that the fact that she could change her mind doesn't make it pas besale. It's still, as of now, it's ain't le pas besale. So Ebazai, same thing here. Nida, the Torah was matir because yesh lahater. So that's the equivalent of pas besale. In fact, he seems to suggest that it's one and the same thing. Yesh lahater mishum demikri yesh le pas besale. But by meiredes, where the Gemara says ain't le pas besale, the gabi the financial. So, same thing, the gabi the yichud. She might change her mind, but right now it's not pas besale. So, asr lisyachad ima ela be'edim. That's what the Marsham says. Right, so seemingly the Marsham expanded this halacha to essentially include all the cases that we suggested. And specifically, he was focusing on a meiredes. Right, and according to him, it hinges on pas besale. So if there's pas besale, which means that we're on track, the Poyal Mamish, to get back together soon, that's fine. And if not, and from meiredes we see that even if she just says no, that's already not pas besale, and that applies here as well. Another tshuva they're metzayin to is from around that time, slightly later. Shut Zkan Aaron of Aaron Walken was a Rav that came from Lita. He ended up as a Rav in a Pesach in Poland between the wars. He was killed in the Holocaust. I believe he has Lubavitcher Einiklach, Zeir Wichtig. I think he has Einiklach by that name in Chabad. So he writes, Chelik Beis Simon Chavtes. He anonymized it a bit, doesn't say who the Rav is and where the place is. Interesting question. So there's a sheikhet in that Rav city that's doing something terrible. What's he doing? It started with his first wife. His first wife was too weak. It was dangerous for her to become pregnant, but there was no birth control. So she simply stopped going to the mikveh for that reason. They had a good reason. Fine. Then she passed away. She was schwach, so she passed away. He married someone else. But once he got a taste of this lifestyle, he continued it with the second wife as well. Although their marriage is very nice, otherwise he treats her like an ishtei tahira. They're fully showing each other kiruv, chiba, gam chadar hamitois. The two beds are next to each other, but she's not going to the mikveh. It's not just him and his wife. They were the trendsetters. Everyone in town picked it up from them. So now many other nashim kshedas, some of them haven't gone in years. Some go once or twice a year, but they're trying to lower their chances of becoming pregnant. So the Rav Shaila was, what do you do with him? Can we still trust him on shchita when he's doing something so odd and not just a personal thing, but it's had a bad effect on everyone else? Of course, the underlying sociological thing here is early attitudes in the last century to birth control and what the options that were available at the time, but this is a more modern question, you could say. So Aaron Walken says, I was very shocked to hear this. He was taken aback. First he's hearing of this type of attitude, thought process. Specifically a sheikhet, that all the kashrus depends on him. To do something like that, that's ein das Torah, das Adam, you can't tolerate something like that. Now, he says, you didn't write in your letter what the real reason is, what is his motive? He says, but I figured it out. You're telling me that it's not, essentially that it's not, there's no sakana for the second wife. The first wife had a problem, not the second wife. If it was a sakana, and the doctor said it was a sakana, then why do this whole precious staying away from each other? Get a heter from a Rav and be meshamish b'moich. It goes into the pratim that it's taka, not only you can do it, but you should do it. Elavadai, that's not the case here. There's no chash sakana. So the way he phrases it here is, maybe he doesn't want it to damage her body. He wants to keep it, whatever. Kekalam ekushetas, kedarkan shalanshi der hamabel. The idea you see in Tanakh of people who didn't want their wives to become pregnant. Although later he acknowledges the more reasonable explanation. So he says, if he's doing this when he wasn't a Kaim Pirividivya yet, so that makes him a Mummer, L'Davar Echad, he's a Mummer, L'Inyan Pirividivya, doesn't want to be Mekayim this mitzvah. The Rambam, the Taka says this, that this is a musik of Mummer L'Pirividivya. The Rambam says that the someone doesn't want to get married. And even if he was Mekayim Pirividivya, but you're still a mummer to la'edav al tarnach yadecha. There's a drabbanan, you should have more children, so he's a mummer to that. And b'chlal, it shows that he's lacking emunah and betachin, and here's where he sort of acknowledges perhaps the real reason. What's the main reason? People might not want to have children. It's too much of a burden. They don't see how they can afford it. So he says, someone with that type of reasoning is demonstrating chisar and emunah and betachin. So that means he doesn't really trust in Hashem. If he was a Maiman Gomer, that Hashem is on him a finest kolchai, so ba zachar v'kikara imay, a child is born with a source of sustenance. So what's going on here? So that shows you b'chlal he's not a Maiman. And even if you see he's from in every other area, that's not real Yirah Shemayim. He's just a force of habit, or he's afraid of society's reaction. He doesn't want to lose his job. But we can't trust him deep down that he believes in anything. And that, if it would be precious, if he was doing all the harchakas, then he would be a mummer to either Pirivirivya or Le'edav al Tanach Yadecha. But you said he's not even being Mekayim the harchakas. And they're not ashamed, and they're misyachid b'yem v'layla. So he's being over on other things. And now he gets to the point, I share that because it was interesting, but now we get to the point at hand. He says we have a bigger issue here. Forget about the harchakas and that. What about yichud? Taka, is there an issue of yichud here in this situation? Right? Because you have the Taisvis says, yesh laheter, and kvar ba'al oisa. Right? And Taisvis says both. That means even if kvar ba'al oisa, you still need the reason of yesh laheter. One isn't enough, you need both. So if the whole yisoid, or big part of the yisoid of the heter of yichud with nida is yesh laheter, we're getting somewhere. So mistaber that we're talking about a normal cycle, 12 days, and on that small period, the Torah says, suga b'sheshanim yidden have a special koyach that they can last 12 days. The person's thinking, it's a short amount of time. But in this case, yomim v'shanim, she's tamei for years and years. Who says a person can keep his yetzer in check? So maybe asur l'syachadima. So it doesn't use the words pas b'salei like the Marsham, but seems to be a broadly similar idea that it doesn't count as yesh laheter. Then he raises a different point though. He says, l'chayra, look in halachas of yichud, it says asur l'syachadim erva. Why? Shadavar zeh goyrim legalis erva. One thing leads to another. He says, though, what's the whole reason for their bizarre behavior? Why is she not going to the mikveh? Because they don't want her to have the chance of becoming pregnant. So can we say that the yichud will lead to legalis erva? Their whole attitude, their whole mindset is we're trying to avoid. Says in Psachim, you have this idea, you're trying to burn the chametz, you're going to eat the chametz. So they're trying to avoid each other. That's going to lead to being together. And he doesn't slug that up. So it seems to have introduced a new idea here. Maybe we can use new svaris. Not yesh laheter, but we know that they don't want to be together. And he says it's not a teretz for this guy, it's just a teretz for Be'ila Mamish. But if they're just trying to avoid pregnancy, there are a lot of things they could do up to that. They can fool around in many different ways. Shaleka Darka, or Dash B'Fnim Azayim B'Chutz, never mind Chibuk V'Nishuk, which is also Asam in Atayr B'Ni Dasa. So, in this case, the yichud can bring to enough of erva that we would say, for this guy, that Dover Zegoyin and Megales erva. And that's besides the fact that beds are together, which is terrible. And Maisa, he says that surely, this guy's very much no good. However, because his family's parnasa and it could cause machlekes, so we should give him a warning and confront him and say, look, here's your chance to change your ways. And if he's makabel on himself, and etc., then maybe we can talk. So he's going after the shaykhid, he's attacking the shaykhid, but like we said, he ultimately acknowledged the possibility that in a case where their whole attitude, their whole mindset is that we're trying to stay away from each other, then maybe we're talking at chayshish to yichud. So Bazoi, we have the kernel of an idea here that maybe we could also apply to the cases that we mentioned earlier. The marriage is over, etc. Masha'en Kain, here in Shulchan Aruch, where the chashash is that be'emes, they want to be together, right? Here in Shulchan Aruch, not for the halacha, they were totally in for the long haul. The halacha says you're not allowed to be together. So that's when you have a problem. And Ebazai, this would not work for Baal Tshuva l'chayra, because they want their marriage to continue. They just have a problem with this halacha. She doesn't want to go to the mikveh. So B'chlal, if we had to be magder the discussion, so the point we just made is the geder by yichud, that by default it's always aser, unless you have the special conditions from Gemara, from Taisvis, to be mata yichud with a nida, or no, it's aser whenever there's a concern. But if you have other reasons and svaras to say why there's no concern, then maybe it's, by which we mean specifically that will end up with a bia betuma. So if you have other svaras, maybe you can use them. And then you have the other point that the Marsham and the Sgan discuss, which is, what is the definition of yesh laheter b'chlal? Is it only when she's roya machmas tashmish? Masha'enkein, if it's just up to her, then she can always change her mind or not. Now let's take a look at some of the more recent poskim, those who passed away in the last couple of years. So you have the Mayor Bransdorfer from Yerushalayim, the Knei Beisim. So Chelik Beisim in Kovhei, Tshuva from Tafshim and Vav. So he's asked about a couple taka that they're in a fight for many years. There's no Chai Ishus, and they're not even, at this point, they're not even using the same bank account, they're not even using the same finances, and they had children, etc., etc. But even back then, the marriage never went well. They were always angry at each other. At this point, it looks like it's been consistent throughout their whole marriage, and at this point, I guess after they raised their family or whatever, it doesn't look like there's any chance that they'll ever get back together, and they're in divorce proceedings. But, like we said, each one wants to make sure they don't lose control of the property, so they really don't want to move out. So they're still living like two strangers in the same house. So the question is, what's the suffix, right? So do we say that it's taka shalei kadin, she's not being toivel, and the whole heter is because yesh heter li yisurai, and the fact they're getting divorced means that ein li heter li yisurai, so also to be misyachid, or the whole reason why they want to get divorced is because they hate each other. So what's going to happen? What's the worst case scenario? They're going to make up. They're going to say, you know what? Forget it. We want to be together. No, weiter. The second they make up, they want to be together. So yesh heter li yisuram. They'll say, fine, okay, let's start counting. Let's go to the mikveh. So what's the problem here exactly? Either they hate each other, nothing's happening, or they make up and they are mat to the yisr. That's the question. So he discusses it. He says, in his opinion, Vada, the whole yisoid is that yesh laheter, the heter of being misyachid, the ish is yesh laheter. And Ebazoi, as of now, it looks like it's not happening. L'chayr, there should be also to be misyachid. That's the side that he leans to. Maybe it's only when they're asr min adin to each other, then you say in la heter. Mashenkin here, it's no ein la heter, they could do whatever they want. He says no. Because he tries to argue, we find similarly in halacha that a yichud with a pnuya tahira, she's not a nida, it's still asr midrabanan. Yesh heter, they can get married. He says it's taka discussion. From Tosfos it's taka mashma that maybe taka it is mutter min ha-Torah, but most poskim seem to think it's still asr min ha-Torah, yichud with a pnuya tahira. He says there's a chikrei leiv. The chikrei leiv says, b'chlal, there's a whole other reason for the heter of yichud. Stam, it's more famous. The Rosh says in Kitzer Piskei Nida, at the end of Nida, that why is it mutter for a man to be with his wife who's in Nida? He says, Pashut, it's not shaykh, it's not practical. What you're gonna every month they're gonna split up, have to move out. It's not how we live. Can't avoid being misyachid with one. What are you gonna do exactly? So that's the way the Rosh frames it. So he says, that would only apply to a nida, but not to a regular issues in a nida, but not to pnuya. It's no more. It's the same yichud as every other erva. You have to be nizar. In yichud, it's not harder to be nizar. And even Tosfos that says yesh lahater, the chikrei leiv said that they can get married. That's not called yesh lahater. You don't actually, the yesh lahater has to feel psychologically like, it's within my means, it's within my reach. So first of all, who says she'll still be around? If she's tamei now, who says she'll still be around when she becomes tar? Who says she's going to b'chlal want to agree to do anything with him? So when it's tam a random stranger, pnuya, can't say yesh lahater. That's what Chikrei Leiv says. That's the yisoid for the yichud in that case. So you can apply the same sevaris you're going to use to explain why yichud by a pnuya is aser, even though yesh lahater technically. So the same would apply here as well. What's the vart? Kasher lihizar. Kasher lihizar is when you're living a normal marriage, you're together, then it's kasher lihizar. Otherwise, someone's going to have to leave the house. But here, they're not living together as normal husband and wife. So, very easy for them to avoid each other. They just have other reasons why they are insisting on staying, but it's very easy for them to completely move on to different places. That's not a good reason. If two other people if two strangers, a man and a woman, were arguing over a property, and they also each wanted to stay on the property to make sure, does that mean we're matu yichud now? And even the vart, according to Tosfos, that doesn't count as yesh lahater, because who says she'll ever agree? The same thing here. After all the fighting they had, who's to say? Why would you assume that they would get back together now? That's like a third variation of the taina that you can't say that yesh lahater. So this was all until now about this question of yesh lahater, not yesh lahater. Now he gets into the other question. Can we use other sevaris to say that nothing bad's going to happen anyway? He says, you said they're fighting. So why would they ever be nichshel? And if they do make up, then she'll go to the mikveh? He says, no. He says, when we talk about yichud, we're concerned that something will happen. What are we actually concerned about? Is it a pitui scenario? Is it an einus scenario? He says, whether we say it's pitui, whether we say it's einus, or whether we say it's both, which is something he says Pais can talk about. But the point is that he's gonna enter this state of mind where he wants to make it happen, and he'll do whatever he has to do. Right? Even two strangers. This is what we're concerned about. Even if they hate each other, we don't find that Paiskim say this about any other Yisur Yarai. If they hate each other, then it's fine. Right? Because we don't know what's going to happen at that moment. Something's going to happen. He's going to be overcome, and now either he'll be so determined that he'll seduce her, or worse. So in this case as well, even though they're very distant from each other, but maybe he'll be overcome in that moment, and he'll seduce her, or worse. So according to him, according to halacha, there is no such concept in halacha that we're confident that nothing's ever going to happen. These 2 points somewhat contradict each other, right? Because when it came to Yesh L'Heter, he said, no, they're never going to make up. When it came to, they're never going to be together, they hate each other. No, then maybe they're going to make up. Okay. He was trying to be mechalik, that the concern of yichud is like an on-the-spot thing, that it'll be mefater or ma'anisr right around the spot. Okay. Well, still a little hard to reconcile the two points. Then I found the Marsham. You see the Marsham Taka says that even if she's just a meiredes, not even the marriage is over, just a meiredes, it's aser. Kol shekain here, where their mamish, they would otherwise be far apart, if not for the financial reasons. He says, if the Marsham we have this extra vart, that there's the paspasale element over here. That explains all of these things we've been discussing. Pnuya, right? There's no paspasale, but pnuya, that would be the reason why pnuya, the yichud is aser. He says, there's even more, there's the Sgan and Baron Walken. And he says, the Baron Walken Taka said that it only works for 12 days. Yesh L'Heter is only if it's a 12-day cycle, not if it's longer. He seems to skip the part where the Sgan seemed to mention this other svara, that if they their own logic was that they don't want to become pregnant, he was makabel that, seemingly. Okay. But for all these reasons, the Knei Baisim says that it's taka aser for them to be together, if it's midatayra, midrabanon. So every moment that they're together, they're over in Isser Yichud. And there's another tshuva in Chelek Gimel Sim Kuf Zayin where he answers even more barichas to more discussion, but obviously we can't get into all of it. On the other hand, representing the other side of this debate, we have a tshuva from Menashe Klein, Mishnah Halachas, in the more recent Chalakim, Chelek Yud Zayin, Siman Lamed Hey, a tshuva from 20 years ago, Tafshin Samach Aleph, to Rabbi Gavriel Tziner, Nitta Gavriel wrote Nitta Gavriel in Yichud. I don't know if that's why he asked the question or it came up Lamaisa, but he reached out to Menashe Klein. So Menashe Klein says, there was a case, Ish v'Isha, that decided to divorce, but they didn't want to go to Beis Din to do it right. They're fighting it out in court. And until that gets resolved, they're still in one place together. Are they allowed to be together? She's not toivling, obviously, so there's no pas basale. The Gavriel was mitzayin to the Marsham, and the Chayra, Marsham is a pretty chashuv paisik, especially in other kreisen. Okay. You start up with the Marsham. But the Menashe Klein says, but we have many women now that they get into a fight, and it's months or years that they don't go. That's before they decide to get divorced, and especially those who decided to get divorced. So he said, Luli de mistapina, now we can't compare this to a regular nida where they both love each other. So they might do an isser because they're attracted to each other. Elamai, there's a heterli surah pas basale. So that's the concern, and that's the solution to the concern. Same thing with irreligious tashmish. Of course, they nothing wrong with their marriage. They it's just the isser. Masha'enken, if there's some kind of solution, if there's a refuah, even if the doctor says it's going to be a long time, even more than 12 days, they are allowed to be together. The yichud is not an issue. So that's all that. That's the regular explanation for why yichud, when it is okay, when it's not okay. But when they both decided to get divorced, so they don't want to live together, they have no attraction to each other, she's stopping matar herself, that's in fact part of her way to stay away from him, to make sure that he doesn't do it in a spiteful way, so there's no chance of anything. So we shouldn't be chayshish. Be about karcha, ba'inus, that's too extreme. Elamai, they're going to make up with each other, so then they'll be toivel. He brings her ayataka from the other part of this Sgan. This Sgan mentioned this vart that if they don't want it to become pregnant, that could be a sound reason to say that it's technically not yichud. So in that case, he said there's ways around it. You don't want to get pregnant. There are other things you could do that will be an aveda on the isser. But there, the whole description was that they talk out a loving marriage. They just don't want the pregnancy. So Bazoi, the Sgan said that the svara works. It just doesn't apply fully to them because there's other things that they can do. But if you take his idea and you apply it here, where they're fighting, every day they wake up in the morning and they're going to the lawyer, whatever it is, they're fighting for the divorce. So Ebazoi, the Sgan would agree that there's no chash yichud. By the way, when the Sgan was addressing the yesh laheter vart, and he wanted to say it's not a yesh laheter, because yesh laheter is only when it's 12 days. So Master Klein says, I just pointed out before, it's not 12 days. If the doctor says she has a machlet, it's going to take a year or two for it to go away. Yesh laheter in a very, very long time. The halacha would taka be that there could be yichud for a year or two or whatever it is, as long as they're getting somewhere. As long as there's a zman mugbal. And the Marsham, he says, the Marsham brings a siraya from the Meiredes, that you keep on finding the Meiredes because it's not pas b'saloi. Misham raya. Does that Gemara say they're not allowed to live together? That's where the Gemara should have said such a thing. If there was a halacha that a Meiredes refuses to be with her husband, there's an Isser Yichud, that would be the place to say it. The Gemara doesn't say that. The Gemara says all kinds of other things, doesn't say this. No one said it for thousands of years from when the Mishnah was said till now. Until the Marsham came along, no one ever actually said that. Their own was discussing the din of Meiredes. So he's still using these lashonis. He's not 100% committed to this psak, but he's definitely leaning and saying that if they want to get divorced and she's not tovim machmas sinna, it could be mekel. But if it's only one who's determined to get divorced and the other one not, then it's trickier. But ultimately, he is daring to take on the Marsham. If you look in Nittek Avriyah, Halachas Yichud, Perek Zayin, which is about Nida and things like that, so you look in Siv Vav, the way he summarizes it is, there's a couple that's fighting for many years, and now they're just dragging out. They should ask a Rav. This is essentially a shayla to ask a Rav Taka. If they can be Misyachid, you can't compare one couple to another, because you never know, the dynamics in each situation could be different. Sometimes they're divorcing each other and they're still attracted to each other. In some cases it's one way, not the other way. So every couple has to be discussed separately. He's Mitzayin to Menashe Klein's Shuvah, which he also reprints in the back of a sefer and to other Shuvahs there. Now even if you're matter like Menashe Klein in a case of sin, that wouldn't help for a Baal Shuvah, like we said before. Unless you go with the other svara, the svara of Yesh Laheter, which Menashe Klein also seemed to endorse. He answered the Marsham. But you look in Shuvah Svanhagas, Moshe Sternbuch, he says, I was asked about Shuvah and the wife is not. So he says, the Torah says, Suga b'Sheishanim, but that's only if there's pas b'salei. But here where she says she's never going to go, so there's no pas b'salei, so Bazoi, they can't be Misyachid, and he's Mitzayin to Shulchan Aruch Simkuf Peizayin, Sif Yud Beis, they're talking all to be together. We can't be matir Yisra Yichud. And especially here where she wants to live with him, she doesn't have anything against him as a person, so the chances for being nichshel seem very high, so it's savada aser. He has to live somewhere else. The husband says, if I move out, then that can harm me financially, I can lose custody of the property, according to the law. So, Ebazoi, he has to keep on coming with the key and letting himself into the house, but he has to bring people along with him each time, etc., until she decides that this is dysfunctional, and maybe she finally is willing to give in and either be toivel or divorce. So then I saw the Marsham, this Kanar. Then there's an additional issue of Lamer Zagan, she Kaviyachal will agree. What's the story with trusting the Shev Namanos, which is its own discussion. Allah Maisas, if you look in the Yichud Svarim nowadays that get into this, so Mashal, I'm looking at one here called Gan Na'ol. So when it comes to a couple that's in divorce proceedings, so he's Yesh Oisrim to be Misyachid, Knei Baisim, etc. And some say not, Menashe Klein, etc. And it says V'chein Iker La'alacha, that the mainstream psak nowadays is to allow them to be Misyachid. He says he saw this a sefer from someone from the circle of Shmuel Vosner that said this came up a lot of times in his Beis Ha'irah, and the psak from the Vosner's Beis Ha'irah always was laheter, because they can always, best case, they'll reconcile and then they'll keep halacha again, no problem. When it comes to Baal Tshuva, so weiter, yesh omrim, that it's aser. And some say that it's taka okay as long as there's a chance that she'll do tshuva, or at least she'll agree to keep these halachas. And he says, weiter, the ikar, the mainstream psak today is taka like those who are mater. He says that dafka b'shem Rav Yashiv, there are a bunch of Makairas that say that in all cases, B'chal was chelik in the Marsham, he wasn't makabel the Yisod of the Marsham. He says, in Nitzig we have a bunch of Svarim that say that Lamaisa we're leaning, most Paiskim are leaning, unlike the Chivas Vanagas, are leaning towards saying that there could be a basis for being matter. But it all depends really on the situation and the scenario, so the Maskana, this would be a Shaila for a Rav.